This is part 2 of the French Revolution notes. We left off talking about the Directory and its loss of confidence and power, and how Napoleon ends up taking over in a coup d'etat, which is a vocab word you need to know, meaning a sudden seizure of political power. So what happens with Napoleon? Napoleon is going to take control as basically the leader of the legislative branch. His first goal is going to be restoring order in France after a series of, the Reign of Terror and the Directory being unable to keep control. And his first goal is to get the economy stable. And so what he's going to do is he's going to establish the National Bank of France and create a very efficient tax collection system. Now, they're not collecting taxes just of the third estate because we don't have estates anymore. Everyone pays taxes now. But he's going to make sure that everybody who's required to pay is going to pay. He's going to have better control of the economy. He's going to have sound financial management, so make sure bills are paid on time and debts are paid. Make sure there's a steady supply of money, mainly from taxes and from trade and things like that, and end corruption. So what he's going to do is, previously in France, you mainly got a job if you were related to someone, or if you were in the nobility. And now Napoleon's going to go and create what are called lycées, or high schools, where he's training officials to run the government efficiently. So you get the skills to be a tax collector, and you can count and subtract, and things like that. As opposed to, oh, well, my father was a tax collector. I can't read or write, but therefore I should be the tax collector. So if you're mad about having high school, thank Napoleon. The other thing Napoleon is going to do is going to create what is called the Napoleonic Code, and you need to know what this is. The Napoleonic Code is creating a system of laws for the entire nation of France. So one book of laws for the entire nation. Previously in France, there were different laws for different regions, and like a town would have a different law from another town. And so things weren't universal, they weren't national. And now he's making a national set of laws that you have to obey, called the Code Civil de Francais. And this is what it is. So it's kind of like our federal laws, in a sense. He also creates what is known as universal male suffrage, which means every male can vote. Remember, suffrage is the right to vote. So universal means every male within France can vote. And then in 1804, he's so happy with everything that he's doing, he's going to crown himself emperor, meaning he is now the emperor of France, no longer just the leader of France. And here we have a picture of Napoleon. He was crowned by the Bishop of France, and then he turns around and takes the crown. He actually took the crown and crowned himself, and then he turns around and takes the crown and crowns his wife Josephine in a very elaborate display. Napoleon is then going to, he's a military commander. He was an army commander, and he moved up through the ranks in the army because of his skill. And he wants to create a worldwide empire. So France at this time owns Haiti, down in the Dominican Republic. Why you had to learn it for the South American countries quiz. And he's going to take Louisiana. It was Spanish property, and he's going to wheel and deal his way with Spain to get Louisiana from them, because he kind of took over Spain and put his brother in charge of Spain. He says, "Dear brother, I'd like Louisiana." And his brother says, "Okay, you put me in power, you can have Louisiana." So that's how Napoleon ends up getting Louisiana. Eventually, he's going to sell Louisiana because Haiti is having a lot of rebellion issues. There's not a lot of people living in Louisiana. They only have New Orleans because of it. But that's why there's a lot of French culture in Louisiana, and New Orleans specifically. And so he sells Louisiana to the United States, to Thomas Jefferson, and eventually Haiti is going to have a whole revolution and kick the French out, which we will talk about in our Latin American revolutions unit, or part of this unit. So Napoleon is fighting on a lot of fronts. He's also fighting in Europe. Okay, you can see in the map what's the Napoleonic Empire is in the darkest blue. So France and the Netherlands and parts of Italy and what is today like Croatia. And then dependent states means that he has put his friends in power in these light blue areas. So Spain, his brother was in charge of Spain. The rest of Italy and parts of Germany and Prussia. And then the rest are his allies. Okay, everything in purple is allied to Napoleon, and the only thing left is what's owned by the British, Portugal, and obviously England, and the islands in the Mediterranean. Russia is no longer in this, and so Napoleon said, well, I've taken over most of Europe, so why not take over Russia? It can't be that hard, they're just a bunch of peasants. And so Napoleon tries to take over Russia, and he invades Russia. And so you can see in the map how he enters Russia, and he fights at Vilna and Smolensk and Borodino, and then he ends up going to Moscow. And the Russians practice what is called scorched earth policy. And the scorched earth policy is that as we retreat back towards Moscow, we, the Russian people, are going to burn everything to make sure that Napoleon and his troops cannot live off of the land. There's a very funny video if you download the PowerPoint and watch the Invade Russia video. It is the French troops telling you how to invade Russia from the horrible histories. Quite funny. So take a minute and do that. So he ends up having to retreat because he's lost half of his soldiers. And the crazy thing is that he enters Russia in June. And if you know anything about Russia, if you notice that he gets to Moscow around September, when does winter start in Russia? Usually around late September, early October. So he ends up getting caught in the winter in Russia, which is not a good idea. And his men don't have proper uniforms, and they're out of shoes and things like that, and they're running out of food because the Russians have burnt everything, and they can't live off the land, and they can't get enough food from France to supply their troops. And so everyone's pretty mad about this. And there's this cool map that shows his advance, okay, in red. And you can see the width of the line, the width of the red line, is how many troops he has. Okay, so a small little part goes off up here to the top, and it shows the timeline across the bottom, the date. And it shows, and this is the date of the retreat, okay, so he's entering June through September, but as he's retreating from Moscow, you can see on the chart below, not only on the map above are his troop size getting smaller in the black line, but the temperature is dropping. So in October, it's about 0 degrees. Okay, by November, it's down to -10. By later November, it's, dipped down to -20, and by December, they're walking in -30 degrees weather. Okay, now imagine it hasn't really been that cold here. It hasn't even gotten down below 20 here in Virginia this winter. But we think that's cold. Imagine -30 degrees and you have to march out of Russia. So the French army was not very happy with Napoleon, which means when he retreats, he's going to be exiled to the island of Elba. Elba is a tiny little island off the coast of Italy. Okay, you can see in the map up in the corner, okay, where Elba is in this tiny little thing, and then you can see how there's Italy, Tuscany, and it's off the coast. And Napoleon is from Corsica. Well, everyone in the world thinks that Napoleon has been exiled. France is going to become a new monarchy under a relation of Louis XVI, known as Louis XVIII, and I don't really know what happened to Louis XVII, not important. And everyone thinks that Napoleon's going to stay on Elba. However, when it returns to the monarchy, the people don't like Louis XVIII, and they want a reformer. They basically want Napoleon back, and so people kind of scheme and they help set Napoleon loose from Elba, and Napoleon returns and recrowns himself Emperor of France. But he is attacked by the British and their friends, their allies, and he loses at the Battle of Waterloo, which is in Belgium in 1815. And the people of France are pretty mad about this. The rest of the country is pretty mad. The rest of Europe is pretty mad about this because he had, covered the globe and defeated a lot of people. And so he's going to get banished again, and he gets sent to a place called St. Helena. Now, Elba was approximately, 30 miles from the coast of Italy. If you look, okay, maybe 40 miles, maybe 30, Elba to Italy. Not that hard to get a boat over there. Napoleon is going to be banished again to a place called St. Helena, which is much more difficult to get to, also known as the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. So, it's very hard for him to get off of it, and he's much more well guarded, and Napoleon is going to die on the island of St. Helena. But if you notice from this map, Napoleon was all over Europe, okay, taking it over. He actually even fought in Egypt. His soldiers were the ones that discovered the Rosetta Stone, which helped translate hieroglyphics. So he's all over Europe. Everybody's afraid that he's going to next take over Britain. There's a whole series of Napoleonic wars when he's taken everything over, and so they're going to exile him. So what happens next is the rest of Europe gets together and holds what they call the Congress of Vienna. And here's a picture of the guys meeting at the Congress of Vienna. And this is in 1814, and it's an 8-month meeting of the European heads of government in an effort to restore stability in Europe. Okay, so basically we're trying to make sure that Europe is not at war anymore. It is going to be led by a guy named Clemens von Metternich, you need to know his name, who is an Austrian prince, and he's highly influential at these meetings. And they decide that a balance of power was vital to stability. So they want all nations to be equal in the amount of power that they have, not one more than the other. So to do this, they contain France. They're going to redraw the map of Europe. Okay, so if you notice from the map, I'll go back to that slide, don't worry. Okay, here was the French Empire before in the light yellow on the left. On the right is what's going to be created afterwards. Okay, so France is going to be contained to a smaller size, the purple. And then we have an Austrian Empire created and a German Confederation created, and obviously Spain is now back to independent. It's no longer a French dependency. And Russia is obviously on their own, and they've gotten part of Poland as a result of this. So they redraw the map of Europe and set everything up so that everybody has somewhat more equal territory and more equal power. They also come up with the idea of legitimacy, where as many as the rulers whom Napoleon removed from power whenever he would take over a country were restored back into power. So when Napoleon entered Spain and put his brother in control, the Congress of Vienna is going to go, "Dear Napoleon's brother, we're going to take you out of power and put the ruling family of Spain back in place." Okay, so that's called legitimacy, putting the legitimate rulers back in place. And this is going to create a lot of nationalism in Europe, okay? The idea of pride in your country, because you share a language and a heritage and a religion and a history. And the whole idea is, we don't want to be French if we're from Spain. We want to be Spanish. We want to speak Spanish and have our Spanish religion and be Catholic and our Spanish history. We don't want to be a little colony of France almost, or a puppet state of France. And so we're going to see, after the Congress of Vienna, a lot of nationalism increase in Europe, and it's going to lead to some problems in Europe. Here's the map again. You can compare the left pre-Napoleon era with the right, which is post-Congress of Vienna. Help you see the comparison. And in class, what we're going to do is we're going to read through an article that'll be posted on Blackboard, and we're going to talk about legitimacy and reaction, and the conservatives versus the more liberals, the Tsar and Metternich, and a balance of power, just to make sure that you completely understand that, because that is important for not only this unit test, but also the midterm. So that is the end of the French Revolution notes.